Within hours of the attacks on the Trade Center, there seemed to be one suspect, billionaire terrorist Osama Bin Laden, and his band of ragtag extremists Al-Qaeda were to blame. They successfully struck the #1 military power in the world in an unprecedented fashion. America would never be the same. The Patriot Acts, Homeland Security, domestic wiretapping and surveillance, the loss of civil liberties, all in order to fight terror and protect us here at home. Is Osama bin Laden really responsible for the attacks of September 11th? If so, why can't we apprehend him? Did you know the FBI does not list 9/11 as one of bin Laden's crimes? Why not? According to Rex Toom, Chief of Investigative Publicity for the FBI, it is because there is no hard evidence linking bin Laden to the attacks. If that is the case, how could the 9/11 Commission conclude it was the work of 19 radical Muslims from the Middle East, under the direction of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Osama bin Laden? Bin Laden has been universally blamed for 9/11, but if one takes a closer look at the available evidence, it points to a much darker power. 7 years later, what evidence has been gathered? Let's begin with the hijackers. Many of them were actually trained within U.S. military bases. On September 15, 2001, Newsweek reported that U.S. military sources have given information that suggests 5 of the alleged hijackers received training at secure U.S. military installations in the 90s. Saeed al-Ghamdi, Ahmed al-Nami, and Ahmed al-Ghamdi listed their address on driver's licenses and car registrations as the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida. Another indication of how the hijackers were tied to U.S. bases was reported on September 12th by Fox in D.C. They stated, congratulatory phone calls were made from a separate aeronautical school in Florida, which suggests inside help for the hijackers.
Now, here at Embry-Riddle School in Daytona Beach, investigators say that they did indeed intercept cell phone calls that originated out of here, calls that were congratulatory after yesterday's attacks, calls the feds say were made by terrorist sympathizers here in Daytona as well as in Broward County.
The New York Times would report that the Defense Department said that Atta had gone to the International Officer School at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, Abdul Aziz Al-Amari to the Aerospace Medical School at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas, and Saeed al-Ghamdi to the Defense Language Institute at the Presidio in Monterey, California. The Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at the Defense Language Institute, where al-Ghamdi trained, went public and said, Bush knew of the impending attacks on America. He did nothing to warn the American people because he needed this war on terrorism. He was quickly disciplined and threatened with court-martial. Even when neighbors called the CIA on hijacker Walid al-Shiari, nothing was done.
Now, you might think that some of the neighbors would be shocked to find out that a suspected terrorist lived right down the street from them, but at least one woman we spoke with was not surprised at all. Diane Albritton was so concerned about what was happening inside the home at 502 Orange Street, she called the CIA. Why was she suspicious?
The odd coming and going, the different rental cars, the odd-looking people that came and went.
At that time, she says, the agency was not interested.
How could it be that the CIA wasn't interested in this woman's story? Other government officials would go public as well. J. Michael Springman, a former head of the Visa Department in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, would blow the whistle that the United States was taking part in covert programs as far back as 1987 to funnel in and protect Islamic terrorists.
Well, it began in Jeddah when I was repeatedly told to issue visas to unqualified applicants. This went on for quite some time during most of my tour there. Under the American immigration laws, you need to demonstrate that you're going to the United States for a specific purpose. And typically, in such a situation, you're going to sign a business deal, or you're going to go as a tourist to see the Grand Canyon, or you're going to the United States as a student to study a particular course of study. And these were people that had no job in one instance. He was a Sudanese who was unemployed in Saudi Arabia and a refugee from the Sudan. But he got a visa for national security purposes after it was taken out of my hands by the chief of the consular section.
At basis, though, I really think that these were more CIA assets, people that were recruited, like all of the folks I've been issuing visas to a couple of years previously. And these people were tools to be done for a job. Well, the visas issued to the hijackers in Jeddah came about as a result of it being a CIA consulate. It was the 5th largest visa issuing post in the Middle East. It was pretty much a closed system, and they simply brought them through there, knowing that they would be protected by the agency, that people would get their visas, or if they didn't get the visas, they could be made to be given visas.
Once I got back to the United States and was out of the Foreign Service, I ran across a couple of people with ties to the American government that told me another story, that the CIA was recruiting fighters for the Afghan war against the then Soviets, and that their asset, Osama Bin Laden, was working with them.
In the early 1980s, Bin Laden worked with operatives from U.S. intelligence, the Pakistani military, and Arab states. They ran a wide-ranging covert network that recruited and financed Muslim fighters to battle the Soviet army.
It is now known that Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset under the codename Tim Osman. Bin Laden would use this handle when he would visit the States.
The relationship between Bin Laden and the CIA was essentially, he was one of their assets, one of the people they could turn to for help if they had questions. If they wanted somebody recruited, if they wanted somebody sent somewhere, if they wanted information, if they wanted something done, they went to Bin Laden.
Bin Laden isn't wanted by the FBI, and he was on a CIA payroll? Is he the brutal Islamic terrorist we have been led to believe, or a mere frontman?
My question was, is it not true that the United States government paid $300 million to the Bin Laden family for the construction of the military camps? At that point, then the person who was testifying had no choice but to admit, yes, that the money had gone to the Bin Laden family for the construction of those military training facilities in Afghanistan. However, he added that none of that money went to Bin Laden himself. Of course, it was a joke.
Osama wasn't the only one working with U.S. intelligence. Hijackers also had ties to federal agencies. Alleged terrorists Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Zahami lived with and rented from an FBI informant. The New York Times stated on October 6, 2002, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had a confidential informer who rented rooms in California to 2 of the September 11th hijackers. But the Bureau is resisting a request from the Congressional Committee investigating the attacks to interview the informer and his FBI handler. Several members of the FBI had their investigations into terrorism impeded and shut down, especially when they got close to Bin Laden. John O'Neill was the FBI counter-terror chief responsible for the investigation into Osama bin Laden. On August 22, 2001, after claims of a repeated obstruction of his investigations into Saudi funding, O'Neill left the FBI.
This document is marked secret and WF, which means it walked its way out of the Washington Bureau of the FBI. It indicates that before the attack of September 11th, agents had wanted to question 2 members of a very powerful family for their connections to a suspected terrorist organization, Omar and Abdullah bin Laden. But the agents weren't allowed to.
O'Neill went on to take a new post as head of World Trade Center security. He would move into his office days before 9/11 and be killed during the attacks.
Yeah. I have 4 children. I've lost friends that John, my friend from the FBI was killed.
I lost
John
people
O'Neill,
too.
We lost a lot of family members.
What did John O'Neill do before he worked in the World Trade Center?
John was the FBI.
Head of the FBI.
He was tracking down fucking
Osama. He was tracking down Osama.
Because the government didn't listen to him. The government didn't listen to him. The FBI, hold on, we want to call a car to car? The FBI fucked up. They knew about the flight training.
Yes.
That was a fuck up for having these people in our country. We all agree on something. And the important thing is you have to understand, I feel what you feel. I've lost friends there. I feel what you feel. That was our World Trade Center. That was our people that fucking died that day.
At a time when bin Laden was the most wanted man in the world, why would intelligence agencies stop their own investigations, especially as they were closing in on him? Robert Wright and others within the FBI also had their investigations into terrorism stopped prior to 9/11.
Since August of 1999, I've been working to legally expose the very real and foreseeable Middle Eastern terrorist threats to American citizens at home and abroad. From 1993 to 1999, I was assigned to the Chicago Division's Counterterrorism Task Force. The successful investigation, which was codenamed Vulgar Betrayal, V-U-L-G-A-R, Betrayal, led to the June 1998 seizure of $1.4 million of Middle Eastern terrorist funding. These funds were linked directly to Saudi businessman Yassin Qadi. On October 12, 2001, Yassin Qadi was designated by the United States government as a financial supporter of Osama Bin Laden.